I wanted to do another kind of band review today. And today the band is going to be Opeth. Opeth is probably like the most popular metal band out there. One of the most popular bands, I believe. And I was kind of surprised by their popularity, to be honest, because most people, in the mainstream era don't really know about this band. But like, um, you know, in the underground scene, these guys are gods. Like, on Metal Storm at least that I browse, they're bigger than Metallica, which is like, how is it even possible? You would think that that band would be the most popular, but for some reason, Opeth has more numbers. Because Opeth is a consistently better band than Metallica. Like, I don't care what you say. Like, Post and Justice for All, they're pretty unlistenable to me. Black Album is just normie shit. Like, I don't care. So if you don't, if you disagree with that, I think you're just kind of a purist or something. Because Opeth doesn't really have a bad album. That's the most impressive thing about them. That they just don't release shit music. Metallica could learn a lesson or two from them because they're struggling to make good music in the first place, in my opinion. But yeah, not to get sidetracked, this band is pretty incredible. From the first moments they actually made music up until the recent album. I have to be honest, I haven't really listened to I think the most recent album they did because their music just doesn't really appeal to me anymore. Not as to say like the classic material, I do still think that the classic era is still really great. Like especially around Blackwater Park up until like Watershed, like the 2000s era. Like that's easily their best, their best run of albums. Most people would say, or they would put in Still Life as well, but I honestly do think it's a bit overrated. I do think it's a bit of an overrated album. That might be a hot take. I'll do a tier list on Opeth as well. But mainly made me interested in this band is they were just kind of like a death metal band, but they weren't like a really typical like Death or Morbid Angel or something. They were like a straight up meat and potatoes death metal band. And I know that later Death, of course, did became really proggy, and maybe Michael Eckerfeld became inspired by that. I'm not sure, but he said his main influence is Morbid Angel, which sounds a bit weird, because he is so proggy and shit. But he's mainly inspired by progressive rock. But I would think that Death is also an influence on Opeth. I'm not sure. But regardless of influence, I still think that Michael Eckerfeld is a pretty phenomenal musician. He is probably my favorite singer in metal. Like he has really like punchy growls, like he can like just growl like a beast. But when he really wants to, he can also just like sing you to sleep with a lullaby. Like this dude is insane. Like he can just do anything with his voice, and you'll probably like it. In the prime Opeth was unbeatable. That was the best metal around. That and Agalok, I would say that's like prime metal right there. That's just the peak of anything, in my opinion. But after Watershed, they kind of became a bit more, lo-fi and progressive, and they kind of became more of a classic prog band. As of to say, what are the bands? King Crimson, Yes, Gentle Giants, Camel. Like those classic prog rock bands. Did I say Yes? Yes is probably my favorite in that, in that era. I would say. I think they're pretty heavily inspired by Yes, because who isn't? But regardless of that, I still think that they did a good job of mixing those kind of modern, or rather, those classic bands in their modern material. But a lot of fans that were especially a big fan of like the early era with like Orchid and Morning Rise, like those really like black metal, death metal purists, they all just hated that shit because they were like, Opeth is not metal anymore. But if you already listen to like Ghost Referees and Watershed, arguably their finest albums, or their most fine-tuned albums, I think you can even see it in the back there. Working with this webcam, it's still pretty new to me, but there you go. It's like right there. But yeah, it was already a pretty pristine sound that they kind of perfected on those albums. So if you still thought that Opeth wasn't going to be a death metal band, then you haven't really listened clearly to Watershed. I say you maybe need to listen to it again, because there's a lot of like poppy, badly kind of shit on there, like Coil, the opening song, which is basically just kind of like a poppy hook tune, with like a female vocalist. So it couldn't be more of a pop song if they tried, it couldn't be more of that. It was just extremely accessible, which I like, because it has more variety in the track listing, as opposed to just like straight up, just straight up one style of music, which I find really boring. Like I tried to find some, trash music for this list to talk about, and I just listened to straight up thrash metal, like Slayer, Razor, Sodom. I just didn't understand how people can listen to that shit. Slayer I still think is a bit interesting because they have that kind of like dark and gritty sounds. But they just don't have a lot of variety, I think. I think that Show No Mercy is maybe the only diverse album they have. And after that, it all became kind of the same shit. So thrash metal is pretty derogative, Not that this is thrash metal in the slightest, but Opeth is a diverse band. That's what made me interested in them. I just like dense, diverse, interesting bands that don't really sound like anyone else. And Opeth doesn't really sound like any other bands. That's what makes them so interesting to me, because you just don't have a band like this. Like the song that they're playing now, Ghost of Perdition, has like a really jazzy, like kind of a pleasant opening to the whole thing. And then the dude just screams out his fucking brain, like the title, and then, flickering tears. Come on. That growl that he does, it's just fucking awesome. Like that's some of the greatest extreme metal I've ever heard. And I know that there's pretty extreme metal out there. Portal, Deathspell, Omega. I'm a fan of now. Psy now exists. Cannibal Corpse, Death. What else is extreme? Carcass, Napalm Death, some grindcore. I know that there's extreme music out there, and the things that I said are probably even still soft for like elitists out there, but that's an example of what extreme music can sound like. And Opeth made it somehow accessible. That kind of music, make accessible extreme metal music. It sounds insane, but this band can do it. They actually sound kind of catchy and accessible in there, which makes for a great record, I think. And most people would say that like Ghost Referees, like the album where this track came from, is also inaccessible, but I would actually say quite the contrary, quite the opposite. I think it's actually really accessible. It has kind of like a gloomy, ominous vibe to it. But overall, it's still like really catchy and anthemic, and it has like actual like poppy kind of ballads towards the end of the album, which with Isolation Years, which is a really beautiful like moody guitar kind of ending to the whole album, which just makes it a fantastic album in my opinion. I think it's also like right there. My cat kind of scraped it before he passed away. But I still have it on vinyl. Maybe get a new one because mine is a bit scratched, so it's a bit unfortunate. But regardless, I mean, these guys made like 10 great albums, and then they just kind of turned into kind of a boring proggy band or prog rock, I guess. I think Heritage is boring. I think actually Pale Communion is really good. It's like, I think that's a really underrated album. I find it still pretty catchy, captivating. It has like long songs, but you can just put them on and just vibe to them. So I think that's actually a really good album. I think Sorceress is good as well, but I do think that the production just really sucks ass on that album because it's on Nuclear Blast and that's not great. If you're on Nuclear Blast, you might as well record your album in like a shit bowl because it just sounds like shit, in my opinion. So yeah, I think they just kind of threw their sound away with that album, and I haven't listened to the album after that because Sorceress didn't really captivate me. So I was just kind of like, yeah, I think I'm done with Opeth. But regardless of that, I mean, they still made like 10 amazing albums that I all love. So, you can't really say that about a lot of bands. Like, how many bands can say we've made like 10 masterpieces? Like, there isn't like a single metal band that I can think of that can say that, And I don't even think that all of the metal albums are like the masterpieces. I think, all of like their metal albums beside Orchids are like potential masterpieces. And then Pale Communion, I would say, is like also arguably a masterpiece. Like that album really grew on me. It really grew me. And I think also because I watched a video by Notes Reviews, I think is his name. Kind of like that nerdy proggy guy. I actually like his content; he's pretty good. So I would recommend to check him out if you like, proggy, like modern, like neo prog bands like Marillion, Opeth, Porcupine Tree, Pineapple Thief. Kind of like those modern neo proggy rock bands. Like that. You can definitely check him out for that. So I would recommend. And he actually, if you want to watch his like Opeth videos, a spoiler, before you're gonna watch it, and you somehow found my video first after his, Pale Communion is like his favorite album from them, which is really surprising to me. But I do get it. It's like their most proggy, dorky album. So of course, a dude like that would love it. And I mean, I'm not discrediting him. I'm saying, yeah, I'm hearing what he's saying. It's actually a really catchy, good album. It's like really cleanly produced. It's like an actual like kind of dorky 70s prog rock sound on it. Like it's really, proper for the style that they're going with because they just want to sound like a Yes or King Crimson worship band, and that's exactly how they sound on Pale Communion, which is great because I love Yes and King Crimson. So that's great. I do love that album. So let's let's look at the albums first. I think if people are actually watching this, I think you guys did enjoy that live performance. I think it was Hellfest or something like that. That was the Egalog one. That's Opeth. This is Wacken. I mean, their stage shows are fucking like look at all these lightings. Like Opeth definitely has a bigger stage than Agalog because Opeth is just a gigantic band, I guess. Like I usually don't even realize how huge Opeth actually is because I just don't really focus on like the popularity of a band. I just focus on the actual quality, and I mean Opeth has that in spades, of course. Still one of my favorite bands. People rocking out with a hippo hats. That's cool. But yeah, I mean, Michael just being an absolute chat on air, of course. He's like the only like member that's still from the 90s on there. Is he 50? I thought he was older. Oh, there we go. Just keep rocking out forever, man. He's such a legend. He's probably my favorite person in metal, to be honest. But yeah. Yeah, they have a new album coming out. I haven't really listened to this one. Sorceress is not really liked, I guess. Bill Communion is the highest rated one out of like their modern album, so that does say something. Yeah. I do like Sorcerers though, but it's definitely like a weaker point in their career. So I think they have like 10 albums in like their metal era. 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 actually. Yeah. I guess so. 9. They do have 9. So I guess that Opeth has 9 masterpieces. Because I don't really like Orchid all that much. Yeah, let's just rank them because my bias is gonna get in the way, and I'll kind of reveal already what is my favorite. So this might surprise some people because most people would like give the obvious albums like the highest rating, but I'll get into what is my favorite, and then you might see it on like this list right here. I do have it ready already, but I want to talk about the bands first. Then you might see it. So the first one that I will rate is of course Orchid. I'll also create another tier if that's possible here. Right here. At row below, we'll make it purple. And I'll just call that... Have I done it now? No, I've just made D purple. Deep purple. Let's just make the green. Yeah. Okay, that's green. And then the yellow one can be... let's make it pink. And I'll just call it Haven't Heard. Because I'm gonna put the new album in there because I just haven't heard it. I just wasn't really enticed to listen to it because the modern sound of Opeth doesn't really appeal to me. Which is probably not a surprise, but that's just my opinion. Haven't heard. So I'm just gonna put that album in there because it just doesn't really appeal to me. I don't think I'm planning to listen to it, but if people... I think that T is a bit off. Or like that's point above. I guess it's correct. Yeah, it just kind of looks weird on the side, but yeah, I haven't heard the newest release because I don't really care about this like modern prog sound by Opeth. But if people want me to review it, I'm down. But I don't really care, to be honest. Kind of like the new Porcupine Tree album. They were like closure, continuation, but they just didn't really do anything new. They just it just sounds like leftover from the incident. So I was kind of like, why make this? To say to the fans we're still breeding or something, because people still wanted a new album. But after the album, after the incident, I was kind of like, yeah, this sounds a bit uninspired, so you can break up now. And they did, so there you go. Or on a hiatus, but that's the same thing as breaking up. That's kind of saying, if you're like in a relationship, you want to say like, I want to put a break on the relationship. You're basically breaking up. It's the same shit, but you're just saying it in a different way. You're going on a hiatus. You're breaking up. Just say that, I found it a bit weird. Agalok did that. They just broke up and they never got back together. So, or well, yeah, in that live show, that was actually this year. So they got back together maybe for a one-time concert. I'm not sure. But yeah, let's just start with Orchid. Can I put these in order? Can I put these in order? I'm so autistic. I just want to order Opeth albums all day. If I would actually like physically order them, then I would be broke because Opeth has like 1 billion albums. But yeah, I kind of miss the remastered artwork from Still Alive. I think that's actually a really pretty cover, and the remastered artwork for Blackwater Park is also really great. I think this is pretty accurate right now. Watershed was Ghost Referees, Damnation, and then Ghost Referees. I think that's correct. What was Deliverance before that? No, I think Damnation came after. Then Heritage, Pale Communion, and Sorceress. That's correct. Those are the albums that I've actually heard. So about 13 albums, I think. 2, 4, 6, 8, and 12. So they have 13 albums. Oh, well, yeah, they have 14 after the new one. Yeah. But Orchid, I'm not a huge fan of this album, so I'm gonna slot this in the C tier. I do think it's pretty interesting. Like, it has like some more progressive, kind of like a black metal influence almost. It's kind of like melodic death, progressive death, and it is a bit black metal. So it is a cool kind of mix of all those genres. So I think in that sense, it's a pretty cool album. But I haven't really returned to this album since because I just don't really. I find the songwriting a bit aimless, and I think that the direction just isn't there. It just sounds like they wanted to make like a cool kind of blackened death metal album or something, like progressive black, progressive death metal. That's how it sounds to me. It sounds a bit aimless, but the sound is there. It's cool, but not a lot of great songwriting in my opinion. Morning Rise, this is a difficult one for me because I do like the atmosphere on here, and the songwriting is definitely a big improvement on there. But the production is almost non-existent, and the songs are a bit inconsistent. There are some really good songs on there, like The Silent Water, I think, is one of the songs. You got Black Rose Immortal, of course, which I think is great. You got To Bid You Farewell, that's a great closing track. I do think that Black Rose Immortal is a bit overrated because it just goes on for 20 minutes and people think like, oh, it's an experimental progressive masterpiece. And I'm just kind of like, yeah, it's cool. It's a cool song. I do like it. That Scream that he does is fucking awesome, but I do think it goes on a bit too long. I think the song is called The Night and the Silent Water. I might as well just look it up. The Night and the Silent Water, yeah. I am a real Opeth fan. I told you so. Eternal Soul Torture. Eternal Soul Torture is not a great like kind of bonus song. It's definitely demo produced, so I definitely recommend to get the original because the reissue isn't great. Yeah, Black Rose Immortal is pretty great. To Bid You Farewell, all great songs. Yeah, so that's pretty. It's a pretty good album. I would say that especially like the middle to end side is pretty good. I'm not a huge fan of like Nectar. I think that song is a bit filler, so it's kind of an inconsistent album, but I would still probably give it a B tier. It has a pretty good atmosphere, but overall it's not like the premier Opeth album to go to, in my opinion. And then we got to My Arms Your Hers, which is kind of a concept album. I was less intrigued by the concept. I just didn't really follow. I think that they did that style better in the future. But this is arguably like their heaviest album. Like, this is just really dark, grimy, kind of death doom metal, it almost sounds like. So if you want to hear like the darkest Opeth album, My Arms Your Hers is probably their darkest moments. So, I'm not a huge fan of it. I like the Amen Corner, and Demon of the Fall, of course, is a classic, but I'm not a huge fan of all of it, so I'll probably put this in B tier as well. I think I slightly prefer Morning Rise, but My Arms is still good. Still Alive. I think most people would put this in S tier. I do think, like I said, it's a bit overrated. It is good though. Like, the opening song is amazing. Godhead's Lament is good. Benighted is just kind of like an acoustic filler, so I don't really care about that. Moonlight's Vertigo, I really like. Face of Melinda is a really good song. Serenity Painted Dead is probably like my personal favorite of the album. And White Cluster, I've never really liked that one before. In my opinion, I just don't gravitate towards it, I guess. But I mean, the first 6 songs are great. Those are all fantastic songs. So I just think the album ends a bit, weak. So I'm not a huge on that. But it is still a really good album, though. So I do call it overrated, but there isn't really any other album that sounds like Still Alive. So it's definitely above these albums. I'm not sure if it's like the greatest album they ever did. What am I feeling? Yeah, I do kind of feel like it's an S there. I do think it's like on the lower spectrum of S, but Still Life is like a really good album though. So despite its kind of like highly praised status, I do still think some of it is pretty valid because no other album quite sounds like Still Life. So it is unique in that aspect, and I do like unique metal albums. So yeah, The More, just one of the finest Opeth songs ever. Just for that alone, I would say easy Esther. So after that, we get Blackwater Park, which obviously is an Esther. Like, I can't really fault this album because, it opens up with the Leper Affinity, I believe. That's just a fantastic song. Bleak is one of my personal favorites. Harvest is great. It's like an acoustic kind of balladly kind of song. Then you get, one of my personal favorite songs, The Drapery Falls. Always when I want to introduce someone to Opeth, I'll just put them on The Drapery Falls, and they're like, oh, this is what this band is about. They just get it, It's just one of those like amazing songs. I do think that the middle side is a bit filler-esque. I'm not a huge fan of Dirge for November. And the funeral portrait is, kind of just a pointless interlude. But the title track, Blackwater Park, that is one of the best metal songs I've ever heard. Like, that song is amazing. So, yeah, just for that song alone, it's an S tier. But for all of those other songs that I mentioned, it's also just an S tier album. Yeah, it's definitely better than Still Alive, so it's going above that, in my opinion. Then we'll get Deliverance, which is an A tier album, I would say. Deliverance is good, but it's definitely like a step down. It definitely sounds cleaner than Blackwater Park. It has like a cleaner sound. Stephen Wilson also produced this one. It sounds a bit like more jazzy, a bit more launchy, but it also sounds more atmospheric in a way. So Deliverance arguably has a better atmosphere than Blackwater Park, but Blackwater Park obviously has the better songs because it's fucking Blackwater Park, obviously. So I do still really like this album because it opens up with, I believe, is it the title track of this album? Does it open up with a title track? I haven't really heard it in a while, so. But it has some really good songs on it though. Ref. I'm not sure. Yeah, I don't remember that one. Title track is amazing. A Fair Judgment is probably my personal favorite of the album. For Absent Friends, bullshit interlude. I don't care. Master's Apprentice is amazing. And By the Pain I See in Others is a bit, it's good, but I've heard better, so. Oh, that was something that I don't wanted to show. I might have started it out. But yeah, I still do really like this album, so I'll probably put it in. Well, I already put it in later. But yeah, Damnation, the kind of the lighter side of this album, is also A tier for me. Some people might say S tier because it's like the best like hit of acoustic or like folky Opeth. But I do think it's a bit, it's a bit on the mellower side, so you don't really get like that hard hitting, punchy Opeth, which I really like. It's not on this album, so I do really like to put it on though, just to vibe out. But as like a general album to listen to, I'm not necessarily huge on it, so I still slot it in an A tier because it has a fantastic sound. But overall, it's not really an album I return to that much. I do have to be in a kind of specific mood to listen to it, but I do still think it's pretty good though, but not my personal favorite from the band. But I know a lot of people like introduce you to Opeth with this album because it's just pure like acoustic ballads like songs. But it might not be the best introduction point because it doesn't have anything that Opeth really did. So it would be kind of like a false narrative to put people on it, but it is like that. Like you can put your grandma on this and she will love it. It's one of those like accessible albums that anyone can love. So for those reasons, it's pretty great. But I wouldn't really, it's not like in my high rotation or something. But it's still like a really good album. Ghost Referees is actually my favorite so far. So we're gonna put that in the S tier, and it's my like absolute favorite so far because, like I said, it opens up with Ghost of Perdition, masterpiece. That's arguably the finest Opeth song ever made. Then you get to Baying of the Hound, which is arguably the heaviest song they ever wrote. I'm less into it because it's just like pure gutturals and like pure like heavy ass riffs. I'm less into that, but it's still like a really fantastic song, so I can't really deny that. You get Atonement on there, which I really like. Referee Harley Quinn Force, that's arguably my favorite all-time Opeth song. Like that song is just fantastic. Just the different stylistics that it has, the change-ups, and just the overall sound of the album is just fantastic. So I really love that. Then you have, let's see, you have also The Grand Conjuration, which was like, I think one of the first singles I've heard from Opeth. Like it was made into a music video, so I also really like that one. So that's definitely a favorite of mine. The Isolation Years closes it out. Just a really magnificent, just a really pretty like closing song. So I just really love it. So yeah, overall this album just sounds fantastic in my opinion. Like just every note, every touch of production, just everything about it just sounds great. So I'm definitely a big fan of it. Watershed comes after that, which is actually my second favorite Opeth album. So I'm gonna put it also in S tier. Opeth just had like the perfect sound on all of these albums because they were like, yeah, let's just keep this clean. Let's just keep this direction, but let's also just fine tune our sound. And they arguably sounded the most pristine on here with, the coil, like I said, the Lotus Eater, which is like a really like pretty like elegant song, and then it just turns into this extreme like death metal song, which is amazing. I just love that like that dynamic change up that they do. Like this is the most unhinged Opeth album. It's so much fun. So you get that one, you get those two songs, you get A Burden, which is a masterpiece. Like that song is amazing. Like just the scaling on that song, the sounds, the riffs, just the way it envelops onto the record is just amazing. It's just flawless. And then you get, I believe, Porcelain Hearts, which is also pretty good. I also really like that one. That's arguably one of the most poppiest Opeth singles. It's really catchy. So actually, if you want someone to get into Opeth, I would actually start them out with this one because it's a bit more proggy. It's more progressive metal. It's also a bit more poppy. But it also has like a lot of guttural death metal moments. So you get like the best mix of all those blends of early and modern Opeth. So this is arguably like the most perfectly balanced Opeth album. It's really fantastic, I think. So for those reasons, I think it's arguably their best album. I think I still gravitate towards slightly towards Ghost Referees. I just think it's slightly better, but it's still like really fucking good Opeth though. So like that 2000s era shit is just the best in my opinion. Then we get into Heritage, which is, in my opinion, the worst album. So I'm gonna put it in D tier. I honestly can't really remember anything that I like from it. I just think it sounds like rootsy, kind of like bullshit progressive rock with none of the actual bite to it. So I just didn't really care for it. It sounded a bit aimless. Michael wanted to experiment, which I do appreciate, but I just don't think he did a good job. So, there's that. I think we can all agree it is the worst Opeth album. So I don't think that's an unpopular opinion, but I don't hate it per se, but I just think it's just nearly not as good as what they did before. So it's a bit sad, but in my opinion, they had like 4 perfect albums, arguably 5. So if a band goes downhill after that, I can't really blame them because they were a fantastic band up until that point. Pale Communion, I would give probably nowadays. I'll probably give it an 8. I think it is a really good album. Like, that might be my most unpopular opinion, but this is a really underrated album. Like, Eternal Rains Will Come. That was actually a single, I believe, on Roadrunner Records. That this was their last album on that label. Cusp of Eternity, I think, is the most popular song of this album. Moon Above, Sun Below, really underrated. Elysian Woes, good. Goblin, good. River, I just really love the atmosphere on that song. Voice of Treason, great. And those whispery O's that he does in Faith in Others is just actual chef's kiss. Like, that shit is fucking amazing. So I definitely understand why Notes Reviews loves this album so much, because it just has a lot of soul. It has a lot of like emotion on it, and you can definitely hear the great songwriting on like early Opeth. Like, you can still hear that great Opeth in there. And I think this is a really underrated album. Like, I don't get why it only has a 7.6. I think it's criminally underrated. I think it definitely deserves more or a higher rating. I'm definitely putting it in 8. I think it's fantastic. Not that again. I have to fucking edit this video. Let's go. Last album, Sorcerers. I'm gonna put this in C tier. I wasn't really huge on it. I just thought that the songwriting was a bit I wasn't huge on it, and the nuclear blast production, it's not great. I didn't like it. So everything on this album kind of sounds like shit. I do think it has a few cool songs, like Willow Wisp Era, I think, was my favorite of this album, but I don't really remember it, and I rather forget, I rather just don't really remember this album because it's just not a great moment in their discography. And that is my discography review for Opeth, or my band review. Amazing band, I really like them. Arguably my all-time favorite band. You'll definitely see them back on this list. I'll have to edit them out because I didn't want to click on it. But I do that a lot. So thank you for watching this video. It's already nearly 40 minutes long, and I'll see you in the next band review. Take care.